This is Ray Blair with Blairing Apush, the first video recorded during the 2020-2021 school year, talking to you about Hernan Cortes and the conquest of the Aztec Empire. First of all, my white t-shirt is my favorite gift from this past year. It is a meme-styled gift that is my grading sheet, and that if you're writing a long essay that you will see scored on it. That is from Helen Jo. Thank you very much, Helen. Awesome and generous gift. This is the story of Hernan Cortes and the conquest of the Aztec Empire and the ultimate creation of New Spain, which is centered around what became the country of Mexico. Hernan Cortes sailed not too long after 1492 to New Spain, and he sailed to the area that Columbus had left behind as the capital of New Spain, and this is Santo Domingo, which is now the Dominican Republic. And he became allies with the leader of the forces in that area, Diego Velázquez, and Diego Velázquez went and conquered Cuba, which became the new capital of New Spain, and Cortes worked with him and then persuaded him in 1518, after the solidification of the conquest of Cuba, to allow him to lead an expedition to Mexico, to Central America, of which not much was known yet, and the existence of the Aztec Empire and its riches were not completely understood at this point. Velázquez became wary of Cortes's plans. He seemed to be violating the spirit of what he'd given him permission for, and Velázquez ordered him to not go, but Cortes kind of outpaced the order to not go and sent his fleet of 10 ships off to Mexico, while knowing that his governor and former ally and supporter had tried to stop him. When they got to the coast of modern-day Mexico, they landed at Veracruz, the port of Veracruz, and it has become the largest port in Mexico. He destroyed many of his ships, and he took his 600-person force into this area that had millions of inhabitants and was determined to take it over. He skirmished with local forces. He got miles in and started going through the territory of the Tlaxcalans, Tlaxcala is Tlaxcala is the state, or the region of this area, and the peoples that were subjects of the Aztec Empire. And while they resisted fiercely, seeing Cortes's military strength and determination, they chose to ally with Cortes's forces, and the alliance with the Tlaxcalans was a key part of this conquest. So, this is him leaving Cuba. Just enjoy the splendor of the artwork. And the Tlaxcalans, after the conquest, made this piece of art to remind the Spanish that they had been loyal allies. And this is the alliance, the formation of the alliance after skirmishing between the Tlaxcalans and Cortes. The person featured in this artwork is very commonly featured in any artwork either by the Spaniards or Native American societies that depicted these events, and her name is Malinche. In the first places where Cortes landed, as he warred with local tribes and won, she was a gift to the Spaniards to show the subjugation, and Malinche became Cortes's interpreter, and also Malinche, who became Doña Marina, bore Cortes's child, and is therefore seen, at least symbolically, she probably wasn't the first woman to give birth to a mestizo, but she is seen as the mother of the mestizo people, the mixed blood between Native Americans and Spaniards, or European conquerors, or European settlers, conquerors, peoples. So Doña Marina is a key figure and a controversial figure. It's a reminder that this is millions of people, half of which are women, and we're talking mostly about men. And it's also just an understanding that the Spaniards could not have done this without assistance of many different kinds. So Moctezuma, the emperor of the Aztecs, sent gifts to the Spaniards, which was a tactic to buy Cortes off and send him back on his way, and it very likely did the opposite. It very likely intrigued Cortes to go forward. Plus, Cortes was determined to take this through to the end. He was willing to risk everything to complete this conquest, and he was just learning about this massive empire. This is my version of kind of tracing a drawing of the city of Tenochtitlan, which is today Mexico City. It is an island on a large lake, and these are causeways you can kind of see, and then I wrote it a little bit down there in causeway. Uh, and one of these causeways, as Cortes came to this capital city, Montezuma met him, and Montezuma was persuaded to bring in Cortes and his army into the capital city and treat him as a splendid guest. Um, Scholars are uh, skeptical of the allegation or the theory that Montezuma saw him as the fulfilling of a prophecy of the arrival of a pale-skinned god. They believe more that this is not what the thinking was with Montezuma or the Aztec leaders, but that is a common interpretation of why Cortes would be allowed to come in the city. Cortes, which was very common of the Spanish conquistadors and other European adventurers, took advantage of his situation quickly, kidnapped Moctezuma, and ruled the capital city through Moctezuma for several months. And then Cortes got word that the governor of Cuba, Velasquez, had sent an army to retrieve Cortes. And Cortes left about 80 soldiers and allies behind in the capital city and went back and fought with this Spanish army to take out their leader and then take over the soldiers. So on top of fighting through scores of different enemy tribes or tribes that did not want to give in to Cortes, he also had to fight Spaniards. This also did strengthen his forces. And upon arriving back in the capital city, he found out that his subordinate had I'm trying to find my stuff here, had attacked a Aztec religious festival and assassinated the leaders who are officiating it. Cortes tried to placate and calm down the situation, but the Aztecs rose up in arms and flushed the Spanish out of the city. They tried to massacre them, and Cortes was lucky to be able to lead some of his forces out of the city to regroup. Moctezuma was killed in this uprising. Both sides blame each other for the killing of Moctezuma. What Cortes did back with Tlaxcalans, who are now more suspicious allies, this game of watching what's going to happen means that you want to put as little risk as possible into a situation. But many of the tribes who were starting to lean towards the Spanish, seeing the Cortez's success, kind of leaned away after this near annihilation of Cortez's army. Cortes had to adapt to the effective military tactics of that the Aztecs were very good at in manipulating this lake-driven city. So he constructed a fleet of brigantines to deal with the Aztec war canoes, and he returned to the city. And as he returned to the city, he laid siege around it, and smallpox inside and the ability to choke off access to the city made clean water difficult to find and food difficult to find. So the European diseases were amplified in their impact on the city as this was happening. Cortes wanted to negotiate, in part because he wanted to get the gold that they were trying to hide away from, but he wanted to negotiate a surrender of the city because it was a splendor. But ultimately, Cortes had to use brutal tactics to defeat the Aztecs, and started using his brigantines, closing in the causeways, and really, again, just like the idea of burning down many of the ships when they landed, the way out is forward against these, daunting odds. As the Spaniards started circling, closing the Aztec military forces into a smaller and smaller part of the city, many people came to Cortes's aid to be part of the victory. New allies came toward the end. Spanish adventurers came to step up his forces, and ultimately they were able to capture Tenochtitlan in 1521, and on August 13 they captured the emperor of the Aztec Empire, tortured him to try to find out where the gold was, but kept him alive for several years until he passed away. This was a bloody conflict. of the 2,500 to 3,000 Spanish forces that Cortes had at his disposal throughout the entire expedition, so 1,800 soldiers died, about 1,000 killed in battle, tens of thousands of Native American allies died, and probably 200,000 Aztecs and their allies died. Uh, and and when this was a city that was devastated by warfare and disease, and the angry allies that came in expected to be able to really tear through the Aztec population as they were dethroned as conquerors to punish them for some of their cruelty. Still, 2,000 people toppling a sophisticated empire with architecture and military tactics. It's difficult to see how this happens. Cortez's leadership, his determination in the face of sometimes impossible looking odds, and his ability to develop tactics to survive situations, and his single-minded pursuit of victory. Also, European weapons. The armor that Europeans had in particular, and their cannon, was probably the two biggest friends they had. The just mounted horses and using dogs in warfare were new things for Native Americans to deal with, just like trying to conquer a lake city was a new thing for Cortes to deal with. It was not an overwhelming advantage, but it was a significant advantage. Allies, the ability to get allies to exploit the infighting, which is a pattern throughout. There's not a monolithic tribe. There are these tribes that have been competing with each other and have subjected each other through other conquests, and this new European opportunities created a chance to change the balance of power among tribal groups. European diseases, you'll see this in the Columbian Exchange lesson, and in part Aztec attitudes, the trying to capture troops as the enemy troops as the key prize, the thing that showed you as the most brave, ultimately, spared Spaniards, gave Spaniards new opportunities to continue fighting since they weren't trying to kill them. Very quickly, because I'm running out of time on my limits here, but Cortes afterwards was named the governor of New Spain, and he, like Columbus, had a bittersweet history of personal glory in his own life. When he was off in the Honduras, he was deposed as governor. He tried to go back to Charles V and earn back his governorship, but it did not work. He became the governor of California. I'm sorry, he became a explorer again and discovered Baja California. That's why it's the Sea of Cortes, and his people, after a myth of a queen with lots of gold, named that area California, and the Californias, Baja and the modern state of California, are our legacy of that. And he ultimately retired to his estate in Spain in 1540. A little frustrated that he didn't have more opportunity and glory for what he had done in conquering the Aztec Empire. All right, that is Blairing Apush, and we might write an essay about this. That is Blairing Apush and the story of the Aztecs.